Most men are sitting on a dirt cheap and legal compound that can massively increase their testosterone and that can modulate every single beneficial male hormone in their body. It's called aspirin and it's great for lowering inflammation. And if you have inflammation, you'll have hormonal dysregulation, low testosterone, high estrogen, high cortisol, hyperlactin, slow metabolism, fat gain. A lot of these things are influenced by inflammation. And aspirin is one of the best anti-inflammatory compounds out there. I've been doing experiments for the last 10 years, and for the last 2 years, I've been doing comprehensive testing and doing these kinds of experiments. And recently, I've tried 4 grams of aspirin daily for 2 weeks, done comprehensive blood work before and after. I'm going to share that with you in this video. Honestly, I was ready to shit on aspirin halfway through the experiment, but then when I got my lab work back, I was like, this is shocking. And explained my symptoms. And it explained what I was feeling during my experiment. So in this video, I'll break down exactly how it influences your testosterone, your neurotransmitters, cortisol, DHA, all of those things. And it's all backed up by science and my blood work. Because a lot of the science is based on in vitro cell culture studies. And this is why I'm doing these experiments, to see if it actually works in humans as well. And the coolest part of aspirin is that it doesn't just lower inflammation, but it helps to resolve inflammation. And how that influences your hormones is really fascinating. All right, so let's get into it. So first off, how it's made. We have salicylic acid, which is a natural compound found in nature. They combine it with acetic anhydride to form acetylic acid, and then also acetic acid. And so this is basically what you are supplementing. So technically it's not 100% found in nature. It's a little bit modified to make it even more powerful and to give it a unique benefit. All right, so the main purpose of aspirin is to inhibit the enzyme called COX. So we have arachidonic acid, which is a long chain omega-6 fatty acid. And when it gets metabolized by this enzyme called COX, it forms inflammatory prostaglandins. And also thromboxanes, which can influence your blood clotting factors, create blood clots, basically. So when you have an excessive amount of arachidonic acid, an excessive overstimulation of COX, you have an excessive production of prostaglandins, which creates inflammation in the body. All right, so the cool thing about aspirin is that it acylates COX, which means it changes how it functions. So this is normally how it works. This is the catalytic site of arachidonic acid. So arachidonic acid comes in, it gets modified to create prostaglandins and thromboxanes. So after aspirin, it gets acylated. And so aspirin, arachidonic acid, can't enter there and be modified into prostaglandins. But then it also shifts it into pro-resolving mediators, which means that it helps to resolve inflammation. It doesn't just shut down inflammation, it actually helps to resolve the inflammation. That's the beauty of using aspirin. Right? So a lot of people think that only fish oils help to resolve, and it does, but aspirin can actually also help to do that, to assist in that process. So in summary, aspirin blocks excessive inflammation from PUFA-derived prostaglandins. It also flips COX into a healing mode, producing molecules that resolve inflammation. And salicylic acid itself adds antioxidant, antimicrobial, and metabolic benefit beyond COX inhibition, and we'll get into that. All right, so the first one I want to talk about is that COX expression, which creates prostaglandins, significantly increases with age. So you have the young animals and we have the old animals, which is the red column right here, right? You can see that COX expression massively increases with age, and as a result, you have STAR decrease and testosterone decrease. So STAR is the enzyme that transports cholesterol into the mitochondria to be converted into pregnenolone and ultimately into testosterone. So you can see the percentages decreases here, but as COX go up, STAR and testosterone levels go down. So when you inhibit it, you will see a restoration of STAR and testosterone. So here's a human study where they used 800 milligrams of aspirin twice daily, so that's 1.6 grams, for just 10 days, and on average, testosterone increased from 24 nanomole per liter to 28 nanomole per liter, right? So even one guy went over 1,000 nanogram per deciliter right here. You can see about 50% of the people that used aspirin responded beneficially, and about 50% didn't really get an improvement. And here you can see that cortisol also decreased in about 50% of the individuals, and about 50% didn't really notice any benefit from aspirin. So it has about a 50% response rate, which in my opinion is not great, but this is why you want to try it yourself and modify the dose to find your sweet spot, because I think the dose plays a big role in how you're going to respond to aspirin specifically. All right, then we have cortisol. So cortisol is the choreotrophin releasing hormone, CRH, is released from the hypothalamus to stimulate the pituitary to release ACTH, which then stimulates the adrenal glands to release cortisol. So if you have prostaglandins, it basically stimulates this CRH to be released. So the more inflammation you have, the more CRH you'll have, the more cortisol you will have. And to make this a double whammy, CRH also stimulates the production of prostaglandins, which stimulates the enzyme 11-beta-HSD1, which converts cortisone, the inactive cortisol, into cortisol, which is active, right? The inactive form into the active form. So first of all, you create more cortisol, you stimulate the adrenals to create more cortisol, and then you activate more cortisol from the inactive version. And then when you use aspirin, it lowers the production of cortisol, and it also prevents the activation into more cortisol. You don't need as much cortisol. And this is exactly what I saw in my labs. Cortisol dropped. All right, in terms of estrogen, you see the same thing. COX increases prostaglandins, which stimulates the aromatase. So you end up with more estradiol, and then estradiol stimulates COX. So you have this catch-22, where estradiol is increasing COX and prostaglandins, which is then increasing aromatase, leading to more estrogen. So you don't necessarily want to lower estrogen, but the way you lower estrogen is by using COX. Right? So this is what was the main reason for doing my experiment, is to see, was aspirin a good aromatase inhibitor? And it was. But we'll get to that in just a moment. The other cool benefit of aspirin is that it's pro-dopamine and anti-serotonin. So a lot of people associate serotonin with antidepressant effects, but you do need serotonin, but in excess, it disassociates you from life. When it's in excess, it disconnects you from stuff, right? And also, when it comes to athletic performance, which I care a lot about, and probably a lot of my viewers care about as well, is you want more dopamine in relation to serotonin to perform optimally, right? So this is exactly what aspirin does. It increases dopamine, lowers serotonin, improves that ratio, and your exercise performance will increase. So we have the BH4 cycle here, which is the cofactor needed to convert tyrosine into L-DOPA, and then L-DOPA gets converted into dopamine. We have tryptophan using BH4 to be converted into serotonin as well. But it doesn't seem that aspirin manipulates the BH4 cycle. It directly interacts with the enzymes that convert tyrosine and tryptophan into their respective neurotransmitters. In terms of sexual function, and I find this really interesting, is that there was a 2020 meta-analysis, and the dose that they used varied from low dose 81 milligrams to less than 300 milligrams. And it showed that it significantly improved erectile function in people with vasogenic erectile dysfunction. And there was a recent study where they used 100 milligrams of aspirin versus 5 milligrams of Cialis. And as you can see in this graph, the results, the improvement in erectile function was actually basically identical. They also combined aspirin with Cialis, and the improvement was not synergistic, but the combination group experienced less side effects than just the Cialis group. So that was pretty interesting. So aspirin seems to really help to improve erectile function, specifically in vasogenic cases of ED. Not in general, vasogenic. It has to be vasogenic, which is created, of course, and aggravated by inflammation. All right, then we have thyroid function. I think this is really, really fascinating. What aspirin has been shown to do is displace your T3 from the thyroid binding globulin. So you have more free T3 to enter into a cell where it's supposed to be to do the actions. So in my blood work, my free T3 actually dropped when I started using aspirin, but my TSH also dropped, which shows there was a negative feedback loop because there was more T3 inside the cell to inhibit the need for TSH. So despite my free T3 dropping, my TSH also dropped, which means that the cellular T3 improved, which is exactly what you want. So this is why you want to look at the full picture when it comes to thyroid hormones. All right, so the practical male benefits is stress resiliency. So this is basically lower cortisol, higher testosterone to cortisol ratio. You feel calmer under pressure, faster recovery from stressors. You have sharper mood and drive due to more dopamine and less serotonin. You have better sleep because inflammation disrupts your sleep quality. You have lower cortisol, lower prostaglandins, lower serotonin, which can actually contribute to restless sleep. You have a favorable androgen balance, lower aromatase, more testosterone, ending up with more free testosterone as well. You have improved sexual performance due to lower vascular inflammation. And then you have metabolic support by T3 going into a cell, leading to higher body temperature, better insulin sensitivity, and all of those kind of stuff. It feels to me like we're really just scratching the surface, the benefits of aspirin, but I would assume this is just the benefits that my audience really cares about. But if you guys are looking for more in-depth information on this, I have an article on, link will be in the description below. All right, so as I mentioned, the main reason for my experiment was to test my testosterone to estrogen ratio. So just a quick background, I'm using 500 milligrams of testosterone per week, and this is for aesthetic purposes, not because I need it. All right, so this 2062 nanogram per deciliter, I forgot to take my last injection, or sometimes I just skip, I don't care. Sometimes I just want to inject. So my testosterone was a little bit lower, and then on the after, so this before was 2000, after was like 3500, right? So a little bit higher, but this was just because I injected again before doing the test. My estrogen was 70, and then after it was like 114, so it went up a little bit, but this is because my testosterone was so much higher. So my before testosterone to estrogen ratio, because this is what you really care about, was 29:1. And then after it was 30 plus, because my lab that I go to, doesn't measure over 3,456 nanogram per deciliter. So it could have been much better than 30:1. So my previous experiment was with olive leaf extract that I got the 29:1, showing it has modest aromatase inhibiting effects. I will also link that article in the description below. But aspirin seems to be quite an effective aromatase inhibitor at 4 grams per day. And very interestingly, it actually also improved my DHA sulfate ratios while lowering cortisol, which means it increased my DHA sulfate to cortisol ratio as well, showing it's a very effective adaptogen. And in terms of other markers that I tested was DHA sulfate, cortisol, prolactin went down, TSH and free T3 that I also mentioned a little bit, the effect on my lipids, the full iron panel, looking at my liver panel, and then also it had some really interesting effects on my white blood count, specifically on my neutrophils, showing that I had a really good pro-inflammation resolving effect. But all of this I discuss in depth in the article, which will be in the description below. So this is how I felt. I would say like this is the main benefits that I felt from it. I felt really hypermetabolic because at this stage of my health journey, I don't freaking need 4 grams of aspirin per day. So if someone is hypometabolic, 4 grams of aspirin might be ideal. If someone has a lot of inflammation, they're diabetic and to come down on weight, 4 grams might be pretty good. But I was feeling like really warm, and it was coming to the point where it was disrupting my sleep quality a little bit. But this is just because I specifically do not need 4 grams per day. My HRV went up, this is the sleeping HRV, went up by 10 to 15 points. My daily HRV didn't really change that much, but the sleeping HRV was a little bit higher, which is cool, meaning more parasympathetic nervous system activation. And I was feeling really calm the entire time, which shows that like when your cortisol is high, you're in a more stressed state, right? So that would mean like given that my cortisol dropped, I was feeling calmer, showing it had really good adaptogenic effects. So lower cortisol, higher dopamine, lower serotonin, like a lot of these benefits that we as males are looking for. So I would say like aspirin has been one of those experiments that has made the biggest impact on almost every single lab marker that I tasted. And I was really shocked. Like I was feeling, like I mentioned, I was ready to shit all over aspirin before the experiment was over. I was like, let's just wait for the lab results to come in. And the lab results came in and was like, good, better. And like everything improved. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. It's like, okay, so the side effects that I was feeling, which was the overstimulation, like feeling too hot, was just because like I was becoming hypermetabolic and 4 grams was too much. And the reason why I picked 4 grams for this experiment is because there was a lot of research using 4 grams on diabetics to improve their insulin sensitivity. So this was based on human research showing it's safe and effective and it works well. And I like to megadose, so I was like, let's go with 4 grams. If it's gonna affect my, like, the reason why I like to megadose is because I tend to be more insensitive to supplements. And the higher the dose that you use, the more likely it's gonna show improvements or effects on the lab work that you're doing. So clearly it improved every single lab work or blood marker that I tested for, which I was really shocked. And so I would say this is in the top 3 experiments that I've done in the last 2 years. It was really amazing. So if you guys would like to read more on it, the link to the article will be below. And so just to give more recap, I've used aspirin for the last 8 years to lower stress, improve sleep quality, but the doses was much lower, like 500 milligrams to 1 gram, depending on how stressed I was. And that worked amazingly. It never disrupted my sleep quality. But I think the fact that I was using 4 grams was just a little bit too much for me at this point. And I'm not recommending 4 grams to anybody. This is just the experiment that I did. Right, so if you would like to read more, article is in the description below. And I will check you in the next one. Cheers, guys.